Greetings and salutations and welcome to Full Time, brought to you by The Game on News Talk 1400, along with the Game Entertainment and Media, and sponsored by Northern Superior Brewery in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. I'm your host, Scott Nason, as we are joined as always by co-host Daniel Scarpino on this September 13th edition of Full Time, as we cover the beautiful world of soccer. Daniel, it's been a couple weeks. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Scott. So happy to be back with you again as we continue to pick up our content here on Full Time. But I'm doing really, really well. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Daniel, and let's get right to it. And as always, or as usually, we start with the European Big Five leagues, and let's start with the Premier League. Now, this past weekend, there were no Premier League matches played due to the death of Queen Elizabeth II. The Premier League will be getting back underway this upcoming weekend. However, there's still two games that have been postponed due to a strain on police resources. Manchester United's home game against Leeds and Chelsea's meeting against Liverpool at Stamford Bridge will no longer go ahead on Sunday. Looking at the standings, top the Premier League, I know you're happy about this one, Daniel. Arsenal, top of the table with 15 points. Man City and Tottenham just 1 point back, with both clubs yet to lose. Brighton, they lost their manager, but they continue their impressive play in fourth place with 13 points. And here comes Manchester United. What an interesting season it's been for them. They lost their first two matches in the Premier League, but they have won 4 in a row and have 12 points in fifth place, with Chelsea struggling, to say the least, with 10 points. Liverpool and Brentford 1 point back. Right now, West Ham, Nottingham Forest, and Leicester City in the relegation zone. Leicester with just 1 point in 6 matches. Daniel, it's been a couple weeks since we've seen Premier League action. Your thoughts on what's transpired here over the past few weeks.
Well, it's been such a topsy-turvy season so far, Scott, and it's hard to really make much of what's been happening. Liverpool have been far from their best. Chelsea have been far from their best. Manchester United had a disastrous start, and they've since picked things up. Brighton in the fourth position, but they've just lost their manager, who's now gone to Chelsea. And then Tottenham and Manchester City, the only teams without defeats. And then, of course, Arsenal on top, which not too many people expected. So in terms of what we've seen so far this season, the football has been really good, and I've enjoyed it. But you could really expect the unexpected, and we know that that's the case in the Premier League. But maybe this season so far, I know we're only 6 games in, but more than ever before. So it's been good, especially from an Arsenal perspective. It's nice to see us at the top of the table. How long that will last, it's tough to say, but very topsy-turvy at the minute. Scott, how are you feeling about the Premier League?
I'm kind of feeling the same way, Daniel. You know, it's a different season with the World Cup coming here in a couple months, and the schedule very compact. And when you throw the death of the monarch in there and having to postpone those matches, it makes an already very tough window even tougher. But one of the things I've noticed is, you know, spending money in the transfer market early on hasn't paid dividends for a lot of these squads. We'll talk more about Chelsea and their manager, Thomas Tuchel, getting sacked here in our next segment. They spent over $310 million in transfer fees, and they seem to be thinner at the front and at the back. Manchester United, you know, they spent over $250 million. They get blown out by Brentford. They lose at home in the Europa League last week. West Ham spent over $200 million after a very successful season last year. They're in the relegation zone. Aston Villa, kind of the same thing. They're in the same place. Nottingham Forest, trying to avoid what's happened lately, Daniel's. The teams getting promoted from the championship division seem to get demoted or relegated, I should say, in there. They spent over $178 million. You got the Wolves spending $150 million, and they can't seem to figure out how to score a goal. So, you know, soccer is a big money game, but a lot of these clubs early on, Daniel, that spent a lot of money in these transfer fees, and Liverpool, you know, they're not exactly tearing things up as well. It's interesting that sometimes the more money you spend doesn't necessarily make you a better club on the pitch.
Oh, and that's exactly it, and that's why a lot of people will argue that money doesn't buy you titles, or spending money doesn't get you titles. So it's interesting to see, and the only thing that you could say, I suppose, in defense to these teams who have spent so much money is, while it's still so early on in the season, those signings will come good. The money that they spent will come good. They'll climb their way up the table. So we've seen it in the past where some teams have had slow starts. Again, I keep looking at Liverpool because they've had a really, really, really interesting and rather poor start and Jurgen Klopp's been very open about that. But amongst many other teams too, you mentioned Wolves, you mentioned West Ham, Leicester City's at the bottom. So yeah, I think these teams who have spent money, with the exception obviously of Leicester City because they haven't spent any, but these teams who have spent money, I think that they will come good. It's just a matter of time, Scott.
Moving on to Serie A in Italy, Daniel, Napoli, Atalanta, and AC Milan, all with 14 points and identical 4-2-0 records. Udinese and Roma 1 point back with 12. Inter Milan also has 12 points. Juventus struggling a bit out of the gate, just 2 wins in 6 matches. They have 10 points and in 8th position. Very early, Daniel, but any big surprises as far as Serie A for you?
Early doors, Scott, for sure, but Udinese, I'd say, would be the biggest surprise of all. Typically, a club who's actually been affiliated with a lot of English teams in terms of loaning out players and what have you. So, yeah, they're just a little bit of surprise for them to be in the top 4 at the minute. Obviously, I didn't expect that. But again, so early still, I think the likes of Juventus, Lazio, Inter, Roma, I think that they'll climb up. But that top 3 that we see there, Napoli, Atalanta, and Milan, I think that those 3 teams are going to be in the mix come the end of the season. They've been good since last year. Yes, Napoli got rid of some players, but they did bring some in. Atalanta, young attacking squad. Milan, defending champions. So, yeah, City is shaking up pretty good, but still early doors. So I think that there's some room to grow for some of the sides, particularly the likes of Juventus, Lazio, and Inter.
Yeah, I think all those teams will be in the mix towards the top of Serie A for sure. Moving on to La Liga in Spain, Real Madrid a perfect 5-0 and top of La Liga. Barcelona is in second, just 2 points back with Real Betis and Osasuna tied for third with 12 points. Villarreal, Athletic, and Atletico Madrid with 10 points each. No surprise there, Daniel. Real Madrid, Barcelona seems like it could very well be a horse race, but you can't count out the likes of Atletico and Villarreal as well.
Well, I agree with you for sure, Scott. But in the end, if I had to take a guess or if I had to put my money on it, I probably would say that it would end up being a 2-horse race. I think Real Madrid, obviously defending Champions League winners, amongst Barcelona, who's improved hugely under Xavi and the football that they're playing. I think that we can expect that those two are going to remain close, if not at the top of the table, and they'll battle it out to see who's going to win La Liga. But time will tell, and do I really see a surprise in La Liga? Probably not, but Real Madrid and Barcelona playing some really good football. They both look like a great outfit so far early on in the season.
And that Barcelona win over the weekend over Cadiz, Cadiz keeper Jeremies Ledesma sprinted across the pitch during the match as a fan was having some cardiac arrest, and he carried a defibrillator kit tossing into the stands. I mentioned that on my show last night. Play was interrupted for over an hour, but most importantly, the fan was okay. And so kudos to Mr. Ledesma for sprinting across the pitch, helping a fan in need. I thought that was pretty neat there, Daniel.
Yes, for sure, and that's so great to see. Obviously, we're thankful that the person was okay, but yeah, what a charismatic effort on his part.
In the Bundesliga, FC Union Berlin topped the table with 14 points, followed by Freiburg in second place with 13, and Bayern Munich third place with 12 points, tied with Hoffenheim. Bayern slow out of the gates by their standards. Their last 3 matches have all ended in draws. And Bayer Leverkusen right now in the relegation zone early, which is a bit of a surprise. They did better in the Champions League today, which we'll get to in a little bit. But should the Bayern Munich fans be panicking right now, Daniel, with their slow start, or will they get it together?
Well, I think that they're going to get it together, and I don't think that this early on it's a reason to panic. The first 2 games, I must admit, of the Bundesliga, the way I saw Bayern Munich play, particularly with Sadio Mane, I thought to myself, well, they're not going to lose a game this season, and they're probably going to score 150 goals. They were looking that good. So I don't think that it's, reason to be concerned quite yet. The 3 draws in a row, it is a little bit strange by Bayern standard, but I think that they're going to be fine. I think that when it comes to RB Leipzig right now, they're in 10th place. I actually expected them to do a lot better than they are this season. I'm not really sure what's going on there. Again, it's early, but time will tell. But the biggest surprise, as you mentioned, is Leverkusen. I really don't know what's going on there, and you'd like to see them get out of that slump, but something's not right there.
Could potentially be a destination for a former Chelsea manager, which we'll talk about in a minute, Daniel. France, no surprises at the top. PSG 6-1-0, tied with Marseille with 19 points. RC Lens in third with 17, while FC Lorient in fourth with 16 points. Marseille not doing well in the Champions League. PSG is. again, is this the one league, Daniel, where you just feel that it's not going to be very competitive at the top?
That's just it. I mean, you could expect PSG to remain at the top. The one thing I suppose we could say right now about the French league that's quite good is, from what I've been reading and what I've been watching and what I've been seeing, is that there's a lot of coach education going on right now in France. So I would say that that's a positive. But in terms of Liga, I mean, we know the foregone conclusion is what it is. But at least 7 games in, that Marseille is at least challenging PSG. So that is good to see.
Scott Nason and Daniel Scarpino for this September 13th edition of Full Time. And Daniel, it is early in the season, and you see this a lot during any season in soccer, as European soccer is one of the most high-pressure sporting arenas. And that means that football managers are sacked on a regular basis as clubs fear the worst and make changes in order to try to ensure success. We've already seen a couple managers out in the Premier League. Scott Parker at Bournemouth, he didn't last very long. A 9-0 defeat at Anfield kind of sealed his fate for Bournemouth. And then really the big one, Thomas Tuchel for Chelsea. He was sacked on September 7th, just over a year after winning the Champions League. Chelsea has struggled. They spent a ton of money out of the transfer market, new owners, the Bolin Group here stateside with the LA Dodgers, and they didn't seem to see eye to eye with Mr. Tuchel. He is sacked. Just your thoughts on these managers being sacked and just the pressure of being a manager for one of these clubs. I mean, boy, you just do not have much room for error.
Well, I'll address the first thing that you had mentioned, Scott, in terms of your question. So what I think about these managers being sacked, I've been pretty adamant on this, and maybe I have a little bit of a bias or a little bit of empathy because I'm a coach myself. But the fact that managers don't get time to work and don't get time to operate the way that they should, I really do think is a detriment to people getting involved in coaching, whether it's at the amateur level, semi-professional level, or professional level. Yes, it's the nature of the business. Yes, you must win, but sometimes people need a little bit more time to get to their destination. So I think it's very unfortunate, obviously, but I think what really can be turned to is the fact that coaches these days or managers really can't go against the grain, Scott. If you go into an interview or a post-match press conference, you better say the right things, because if you don't, owners and directors and everybody at the club is looking at you. And if you say the wrong thing, it's a bad reflection on the club. So Scott Parker kind of made some comments in relation to Bournemouth that they weren't spending enough money and that they weren't ready for the Premier League. Now, I'm sure that their 9-0 defeat to Liverpool didn't help their case, but he was out the door shortly thereafter. Thomas Tuchel made some comments about Chelsea, and he was very aggressive in terms of the comments he made about his players, and he was soon thereafter out the door. So I don't think that coaches get enough time. I think that saying the wrong things obviously doesn't help. But then to the last part of your question, the pressure that they must feel, Scott, I'd imagine that the pressure each and every day, each and every waking moment has got to be absolutely paramount in terms of the way that they go about their business. They must be in the office 12 to 14 hours a day, but possibly just worrying all of the time, how close am I to losing my job? So I'd imagine that the pressure is very high, and I'd imagine that they're on pins and needles at the workplace. But this is the nature of the sport, it's the nature of the job, and it's the nature of football, Scott.
It really is. And getting to Tuchel, a club that I follow closely, Chelsea, after the ownership was bought by the Boley Group, the LA Dodgers, and, the American group after Roman Abramovich had to give up due to Russia and that ongoing situation. You could kind of tell there was a little bit of a difference of opinion on how the new ownership wanted to guide the club. And Tuchel, you could see it during many matches this year. It just seemed like he was almost becoming unhinged at times. We saw that against Tottenham and the famous handshake there with Conte. And it seemed like he lost the locker room. And if you don't have the locker room support and you don't have the ownership group support, your fate is sealed. I was pretty upset when Frank Lampard got sacked from Chelsea. I wouldn't say I'm not happy that Tuchel did. I do like Graham Potter from Brighton. I think he might be what is needed in that locker room right now. We'll certainly have to wait a little bit while Chelsea will play in the Champions League tomorrow. But that loss at Zagreb really, even though the ownership group said that wasn't the final decision, that was pretty much the final nail in the coffin, if you will, for Mr. Tuchel. Devils. So I'm sure he will come up somewhere, and he'll probably do well because he has a history of doing very well as a manager. Daniel, let's move on to the Champions League. The first set of matches have been played. The results in the first set of matches: Ajax, along with Sporting, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, Club Brugge, who also won today, Bayern Munich. They've won 2 games so far. Liverpool, they get stumped by Napoli. Liverpool did win today 2-1. These matches just finishing. Tottenham won their first match. They did lose today at Porto. And then the second group of matches from last week, Borussia Dortmund winning, along with Zagreb over Chelsea, Benfica, Real Madrid all over Celtic, PSG over Juventus, Shakhtar Donetsk out of Ukraine. That's probably my favorite team other than Chelsea. They absolutely run over Leipzig 4-1, Salzburg and AC Milan tie at 1, and Man City over Sevilla 4-0. Club Brugge also winning today, so they're on top of the group. Bayern Munich over Barcelona 2-0, Bayer Leverkusen over Atletico Madrid 2-0. Frankfurt gets their first win in Champions League as they win at Marseille. Liverpool, they defeat Ajax on a late goal 2-0. And those are the latest results. It's early, Daniel, but any thoughts on the Champions League?
It's been good so far, even though it is early doors. Most teams have played 2 games. Some teams have played 1. Obviously, the Liverpool hammering with Napoli, that was a huge result. Bayern is looking good in the Champions League at the minute. Really like that Group H. That's a really competitive group with Benfica, PSG, and Juventus. Man City, they looked pretty solid in their opening game with their 4-0 victory. And there's been some other results, too, that have been good and some other games that have been good. And I think that with the Champions League, again, like we talked about earlier with the Premier League, we can often expect the unexpected. With the Champions League, maybe not as much, but I'm sure that there's going to be a surprise or 2 along the way. So, yeah, I've been quite happy with the Champions League so far, Scott, and I'm looking forward to what's ahead as well.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot more matches in a short period of time. A lot of times you had to wait a couple weeks between matches. Now it seems like they're playing every week, and this is going to cause soccer some issues, especially when you have conditions, the Queen passing away and wiping out a whole weekend of games. There's just not much room on the calendar. These players are going to have to be even more fit, and I think the deeper teams, Daniel, that have those players they can bring off the bench will be in much better position in a season like this.
Oh, you're totally right, Scott. And I think you hit the nail on the head that with the compact schedule and all of these things that these players and these managers are going to have to go through in the lead up to the World Cup, and with all these other pauses that have been prevalent in all of these leagues, particularly the Premier League. Yeah, people are gonna have to be ready to go. Managers, players, everybody. So it's going to make for some interesting future games amongst the table in terms of how we look at the Champions League and all the Europe Big Five.
Scott Nason and Daniel Scarpino with you for the September 13th edition of Full Time. And Daniel, let's move on to Major League Soccer as the playoff race is heating up. Looking at the standings right now in the East, Philadelphia with a 10-point lead over Montreal. Philadelphia with 63 points, Montreal with 53, the New York Red Bulls in third with 50, New York City FC in fourth with 46, and then you have Orlando City and FC Cincinnati at tie for fifth with 42 points, Columbus with 41, and then a good race for the playoffs. New England would be the last team in with 38 points. Inter Miami and Atlanta United just 2 points back of New England. In the West, LAFC continues to lead. They're in first place with 60 points. Austin in second, 51. FC Dallas in third with 49. Nashville fourth, 46. Portland in fifth with 45. Then you have Minnesota, Real Salt Lake, and the LA Galaxy holding on to the last playoff spot. Daniel, the race is on for the playoffs. What have you seen from the MLS over the past few weeks?
Well, the race is certainly on, without doubt, but what I have seen is that the top teams are the top teams. So we take a look at Philadelphia and we take a look at LAFC. For me, those are going to be the class of the bunch in terms of the East and the Western Conference. But at least the race is good and well on. There's going to be some good games to close things out here. Some teams have games in hand. So I think that just makes it all the more interesting. But time will tell here as we come to the closing stages of the MLS. There really isn't a whole heck of a lot left to go. So, the playoff race is true and well on. But like I said, Philadelphia and LAFC, they seem to be the class of the bunch and really many, many steps ahead.
Daniel, let's end this edition of Full Time with a local soccer update. Here stateside, the Sioux High boys soccer team continues to play their season. They were in a tournament this past weekend down in Petoskey, and they will have games over the next few weeks at home and on the road. And I know you're a busy man with local soccer on the Sioux Ontario side. Give us an update, sir.
Well, everything here in terms of youth soccer is completely and totally wrapped up. Indoor soccer will start in about a month's time, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it in a month's time. Right now, it's all about the university and college ranks. So both teams for Algoma University and Sioux College are in the thick of their season. So if anybody is looking to get out to games and looking to support the team, please visit for the schedule that is for Algoma University soccer, algomathunderbirds.ca, and for Sioux College, visit www.siouxcollege.ca and go to the athletics tab, whereby you can access all of the schedules for both varsity programs.
Daniel, as always, a pleasure to be joined by you on Full Time. A little briefer edition as we had to kind of wrap things up early due to some other scheduling commitments, but we'll do another show here in a couple weeks, either the last week of September or the first week of October. And then once we get into November, my friend, we'll have to set a time and day aside because I want to try to do one every week, even if it's only 15 or 20 minutes, because the World Cup will be played in Qatar. And certainly while all this soccer is very intriguing, interesting, I'll tell you what, a World Cup in November and December, that makes me salivate right now, especially the fact that the U.S. and Canada are both in the World Cup. It's been a long time. Well, I don't know if that's ever happened. I believe it hasn't because Canada was last in 86 and the U.S. was not in there. So this is the first time for this, at least in recent memory. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, without doubt, it's going to be history in the making. So come November, yeah, there's no question about it. Everyone's going to be on the edge of their seat, mainly you and me, but I'm definitely looking forward to talking all the footy come November because, yes, soccer year-round is fantastic, but you can't beat a World Cup. So very much looking forward to that, Scott.
Daniel, you have a great couple weeks, and we will talk to you on our next edition of Full Time, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone who listened. Always a pleasure, and hope you have a great night, Scott, and we'll talk in a couple weeks.
Thank you, sir. I want to thank Daniel Scarpino along with Northern Superior Brewery sponsoring Full Time and brought to you by the Game Entertainment and Media. That's going to do it for this September 13th edition of Full Time. Thanks for listening, and everyone, have a great night.